There's a lot of opinions out there about Upwork, and I'm sure you've seen them. They run the gamut. And today, Jessica and I are going to talk about just how much of an impact Upwork has made to our lives as freelancers. And it's really a before we joined Upwork and an after we joined Upwork type situation for us when we look back at the last 6 years of our lives. And we're just going to give you our honest thoughts and kind of paint the picture of how much of a difference having a successful Upwork profile has made for our lives. And if in case you're wondering, this is not a sponsored video. Upwork doesn't pay us anything. We have no contact with Upwork. We're making these videos because we want to help freelancers, and Upwork has been a major tool for us to become less stressed and more successful as freelancers. So we're going to talk about just everything that Upwork has changed in our lives. And just to prove that we know what we're talking about and we're not just making stuff up like a lot of these gurus on YouTube, I am a six-figure Upworker at this point, and I'm closing in on $200,000 earned after around 6 years on the platform. And Jessica, what about you?
So I'm closing in on 100K earned on Upwork, and both Tyler and I are in the top 1% of all freelancers on the platform. We're both expert vetted, and that's a pretty prestigious badge to have. You actually have to interview with somebody from Upwork, and then you get accepted to become an expert vetted freelancer.
So as a freelancer, what is the hardest problem that you have? The hardest problem is almost always finding and winning new clients. And that was no different for me when I was a freelancer before I joined Upwork. Finding and winning clients was my number one problem, and it was the hardest thing to do. And it's that way for a reason because, obviously winning a new client involves so many things that you have to do, right? You have to have a personal brand, you have to have a portfolio, you have to have a way of communicating your offer to people that don't even know who you are, and you have to convince them, you have to bring them through this full journey of first figuring out who's this person contacting me, what are they offering me, what kind of person am I talking to, is this someone that actually has a solution to my problem, and do I want to respond to them and maybe continue the conversation. And getting new clients when I was fresh out of college trying to make it as a freelancer was so difficult. I remember, just sending so many cold emails, not getting a single response, even though I had a pretty decent portfolio, trying to make networking opportunities happen, trying to meet as many people as I could in my mid-sized city. It was just a grind. I mean, thinking back to what was like 10 years ago now, the word that comes to mind is just grind. It was a grind. I was going to coffee shops. I was just doing whatever I could to scratch and claw and just dig my way through trying to find any and every opportunity I could find. And I had a 9 to 5, and then I left my 9 to 5 because I thought I could make it as a full-time freelancer. And luckily I did make it because I had a very few select clients that hired me right after I left my 9 to 5 for contract jobs. But, it was just getting one contract, doing my very best, and then clawing and clawing and clawing for the next contract so that I could make and pay rent for my tiny little studio apartment. And it was just that on repeat pretty much for about 1 or 2 years before I joined Upwork. And yeah, I just remember it being extremely difficult, time consuming, and stressful trying to win new clients, even though at that point I had a really solid skill set that I could offer the market. So Jessica, I know, you kind of left your 9 to 5 on a whim because your manager said that you could either quit or you could be fired or you can improve your performance. What was that first year of freelancing prior to Upwork? What did that look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, there's no kind way to say that. That was basically what happened. So I had the opportunity to leave my full-time job, a slight nudge from management, and I decided, yes, my gut said, "You just gotta go for it. You just gotta go for it." And thankfully, I had one client. I had one client for, like, I think 3 or 4 hours of work a week, $25 an hour, and things were going well. I had worked with them, I think, for a few months at that point, but again, nothing close to paying my rent. So what I decided to do was negotiate with them because, I just got fired from my full-time job. I knew this client was exceptionally happy with my work. They had written me just a wonderful LinkedIn recommendation, so I knew they were happy. And I don't know if it was like the college confidence taking over, but I decided, you know what, I'm going to shoot my shot. I'm going to shoot my shot. I see that they need support with public relations and social media. I'm going to approach them. And I remember sending the email and they sent it and I was like, we're just going to see what happens. And they said yes. And thankfully, I was able to negotiate with them and get a really good contract. And so I had a way to live basically with one freelance client. And that was fantastic. They were really, really helpful and really, really happy with my work. But then I struggled a lot. I struggled immensely trying to fill up my client roster. Yeah, sure. I had one really great client that loved my work, but I was struggling because that was kind of a lucky situation. I didn't know how to replicate that. And so I would post up at coffee shops for hours and hours, just again, throwing spaghetti at the wall, literally trying anything and everything I could. I was so desperate. I would even look on Indeed and I'd look on like LinkedIn job boards, trying to find contract roles. And it was just such a grind. It was such a struggle, but I didn't want to settle for the 9 to 5. And I was absolutely terrified of telling my family I couldn't make this work. I had to go back to my 9 to 5 because I told everybody, I was like, yeah, I'm a freelancer now. I'm a business owner, yada, yada, yada. And then here I am struggling. And so that kept me going. That literally kept me going. I'm like, I'm just going to keep pushing, and something will come through. And I was not going to go back to my 9 to 5. So I was like, there's no way forward. I have to push and I have to figure this out. And I knew that I could. I didn't know how, but I just knew if I keep going, I'm going to figure out this freelancing thing. But it was exhausting. Absolutely exhausting because not only am I trying to hunt down new clients, build trust with them, build rapport, sell them on my services, I have to fulfill client deliverables. I have to manage my books. I have to do all the things that a freelancer should do. And I was just absolutely exhausted.
Yeah, I mean, looking back, it was just basically all about those emails. It was about so I'm in video production and it was really just about leaning as hard as I could on making a good first impression, trying to get coffee with agency owners in my city, trying to meet as many people as I could, trying to sharpen my website, sharpen my demo reel, trying to separate myself from I'm sure there are all these people who could receive emails from other freelancers trying to do the same exact thing, trying to get their shot. And it was just a very competitive, very, constant thing that you had to do, which is outreach, cold outreach, which is just so not fun. It's a very vulnerable activity that you have to do where you're really just putting yourself out there, you're putting yourself out on a limb. You're trying to make a good first impression. And one thing I always remember was like, I knew how important that first impression was because, I'm just this kid, early 20s, trying to make an in with agencies and different brands that my city had, trying to make an impressive first impression, making sure to include that piece of work, making sure to do the research on this company before I actually reach out because no one hates those emails more. Those emails where you could tell it's a templated email. You can tell this person didn't do any research before they sent their email. And, those emails go straight to spam. So I was always making sure that I talked about what I liked about that company, going into specifics about, what I could actually offer them and, in their industry and really getting granular with how I could provide value. But it was just a constant networking situation, a constant trying to figure out who I could offer my services to, and it was just a constant grind. And that's what I remember pre Upwork.
Yeah, I'll never forget. I don't know why I thought this would work, but I was like, let me think differently. That's how you're going to stand out from all the other freelancers trying to get work. I somehow decided, let me do like a marketing audit for a couple of different clients. Let me print it out and then let me send it to the company's address. And at the time, I want to give younger Jessica credit. That's an interesting strategy. It's a very unique strategy, but guess what? No responses. Literally no responses, but that's part of the game. It's like just trying to figure it out and throwing spaghetti at the wall. And mind you, while we're trying to find clients and all of this and doing all the responsible things that a business owner is supposed to do, we're also learning and strengthening our skill set and learning how to run an actual business. So, I mean, you can imagine, I think we were working constantly during that season of our lives.
Yeah, pretty much. We basically had no lives. There was no vacations. There was no fun trips. There was no going to restaurants all the time. It was just constantly worrying about how to make it as a freelancer, constantly worrying about where your next lead is going to come from, constantly worried about competition, constantly worried about what you should be charging. It was just a constant battle, and that was basically what consumed our lives. Now, looking back, that battle was 100% worth it because it got us over the hump. It taught us all these invaluable skills. We learned how to communicate with clients. We learned how to send cold messages that have a better than 1% response rate. We learned how to present ourselves, essentially, to go from a complete nobody to someone that one of these agency owners or business owners would actually have coffee with and actually give a chance to. And, that was a very rewarding thing when you actually have someone respond to your cold email and they say, "Yeah, sure, let's chat about it over coffee." And, it's a very encouraging sign when you see those response rates start to go up. But even when you do sort of perfect that, it's still a sub 10% response rate regardless, because a lot of these companies, the people are too busy or they don't need your services right now or they have someone in-house. And so it's still, even if you become a master at sort of these freelancing techniques in the real world, you're still going to have to deal with 90% of people completely ignoring you.
So I know you're being realistic. That's really what it was, which sounds kind of sad hearing it out loud. But I remember it wasn't that depressing. The way you described it sounds really sad and depressing, but it wasn't that bad. I remember feeling this excitement, like I'm building my career. I'm building my roster of clients, and I was just moving so fast. I didn't have time to think about, "Oh my gosh, that sucked doing that. Oh my gosh, I'm not going to make it." I just did not have time because I was just constantly going and just constantly throwing spaghetti at the wall. Because for me, even though I'm spending time, whatever, sending these marketing audits out to potential clients and I get a zero response rate, I'm trying something, I'm experimenting. And that gave me a lot of peace of mind despite all the hard work and the grind of it all.
Yeah, it was a happy grind. We were definitely happier than we were at our full-time jobs by a long shot. As long as we could make enough to survive that month and then make it into the next month, and we're not a corporate slave at a 9 to 5, we were happy. And, that's kind of what kept us going, was the fact that we weren't a cog in the machine and we were making shit happen for ourselves. And every successful client relationship that you win leads into the next one and becomes a potential referral, and that referral potentially leads into the next one. So it was a grind, but it was definitely something that we were going to continue doing as long as it took. So with that sort of picture painted for you, what our life looked like in those early days of freelancing, let's talk about when Upwork came into the equation. When I don't even honestly know when I discovered Upwork or why I decided to make a profile. Maybe it was an ad. I have no idea what caused me to learn about Upwork and sign up for Upwork. I remember way back in my college days, there was a similar platform called Thumbtack. And me and my buddies, when we were learning video production, learning how to win clients, we actually created a Thumbtack profile, and we won. I think we won at least one freelance project, and it required us to drive all the way, I think 2 hours to the city from our college town to the city to execute some corporate headshots. And we had no idea what we were doing. We had a DSLR, but we had no idea about lighting. We had no idea about what we were doing. But we won that project. I think we earned like $200 for that project. But yeah, that was the last sort of freelancing platform that I had been on. But during this grind phase of freelancing, I for some reason signed up for Upwork. And, I think maybe there's something here. This might have been when Upwork had just transitioned away from Elance. I'm not sure when that transition happened, but signed up for Upwork. I created my profile. I had a solid portfolio at that point. I want to emphasize I was not joining Upwork as a brand new freelancer. I had been freelancing for a while at that point, and I was just thinking maybe this could be a way of finding new clients. Maybe this could make the client acquisition problem. Maybe it could simplify that part so I could focus on what I enjoy doing, which is making videos. And so I created my profile, and I remember actually taking the time to dial in my profile. I didn't just slap a random description on there. I made sure that every single portfolio item that I put on there was actually really good. And I didn't have any reviews or anything, but I did have an Upwork profile. And I remember spending maybe a week or two trying to find work on there. And I vividly remember my first impression of Upwork once I created my profile. And when I looked at that job feed, it was like, oh, this is just a Thumbtack 2.0. This is just a bunch of ridiculous clients trying to get ridiculous amounts of work done for ridiculously low prices. That was my very first impression of Upwork. And I think a lot of freelancers have the same exact first impression. Maybe their algorithm has been improved, but I do know a lot of people get that first impression, which is, oh, this is a waste of my time. It's almost comical when you look at these job posts because the ask is up here and the budget is down here. And so I remember maybe I found a couple jobs I submitted proposals to, didn't hear anything back. And basically just the experiment was over after about 2 weeks, I think.
Yeah, and I remember this time in our lives where you told me about Upwork and you're like, "Hey, you should check this out." But I think that was after you had your first project on Upwork. And so I remember creating a profile and adding my portfolio. And thankfully, both of us had been freelancing for a few years. So we were presenting ourselves in a really professional way. Again, we both had portfolios, which I think helped us get traction on the platform. But I remember sending out a bunch of proposals. Now, granted, I don't think I knew what I was doing, but there's nothing more humbling than sending out like 10 proposals and literally no responses. And I remember feeling really disheartened and really discouraged because I was like, what's like people are having success with this platform? I mean, not me. So what's the catch here? Like, how are people doing this?
Yeah, like I've told this story before, but I totally wrote Upwork off. And it wasn't until I received a completely random job invite from an agency where I was like, wait, whoa, like this person wants to work with me and they want to work with me specifically. And they're really nice and they're polite and they're going to pay me $100 an hour to do something I can do in a couple hours. Like, this is crazy. Like, this first experience that I had with this totally random client was an amazing experience. And, I came away with $300, like, just like that. I was like, okay, maybe I should keep looking into this. And I think, maybe I found some competitors that had actually been making good money. And I think a lot of freelancers should do the same thing. When they come away with that first impression that you can't make good money on Upwork, my first reaction now, 6 years later, is, oh, really? Like, let's look at your country. Let's filter for freelancers in your same exact country and let's see who's making a lot of money. Because I guarantee you, there are at least a handful of freelancers who do exactly what you do who are making really good money. So there's a lot of excuses that people come out with, like, oh, like my niche is a race to the bottom. There's a million different excuses, but I can always point you to a freelancer who is not lowballing clients, who is charging high rates and is still getting paid very well and is still winning a lot of work.
Yeah, there's such a disconnect because you look at the job feed and you're like, how on earth are these clients expecting talented freelancers to do work for like $5 an hour? So you see that and you want to cry because you're like, what is happening in the world? That's so unfair. And then you see these other freelancers on the platform making good money. And I remember like sitting there and thinking about like how like there's such a disparity between I think the perception on Upwork and the success that you can have on Upwork as well.
But yeah, I mean, it was essentially getting that first project. That's the hardest part. I was fortunate enough to have someone find me in the search results and send me an invite only job, with no history at all. And I won't say that's going to happen for all freelancers unless their profile is amazing. I do know that Upwork is trying to encourage a lot of new freelancers to win work by showing their profile in search results. So don't ever become totally discouraged that you can't win work with no reviews. But when you do get that first project and you do get that first 5-star review, that just makes it that much easier to get your next project. And so I started actually investing some serious time into Upwork. Maybe I would look at the job feed once a day now, and I would create filters so that I only saw the projects that would be relevant to me and that would be within my budget range. And so now I started submitting proposals, maybe 5 to 10 per week. And one thing led to another, and eventually I won that second project and got that glowing review. I do remember, I think the second project I won was, I think it was some sort of tech company that was coming to the city I lived in for an expo of some kind, and they wanted me to record a panel of speakers and then give them a edited video when that was finished. And that went well. That went well. I made sure this is my second Upwork project. I'm going to give this 110% because this second review is just as important as that first 5-star review. So I made sure that, I did my very best. And then that led into the third project. And then eventually it started becoming an actual source of clients on a regular basis. This did not happen overnight, but maybe it was one project every 3 months, and then it became one project every 2 months, and then it became one project every month. And then, I was just like, this, there's something here. There's actually something here. And this is taking a huge load off of my back. It's not replacing my freelancing income. It's not earning me enough money to survive off of, but it's augmenting my freelancing income by a lot. First it was 10%, and then it became 15%, and then eventually it became 30% of my freelancing income, which is kind of where it's at now. It's around 30 to 40% of my freelancing income. That is a huge deal. Increasing your income by 30% as a freelancer, that's the difference between paying rent and not paying rent, and saving money and not saving money. So it just sort of snowballed, those getting those initial 5-star reviews. I can't emphasize how important that is. And then sort of learning how it works, learning what a good proposal looks like, learning how to optimize my profile even further. And, eventually you can get to a point where it becomes a serious source of freelancing inbound leads for you.
So I know our services differ quite a bit. You do project based work, and I do more consistent monthly retainer work. And mind you, when I was navigating and figuring out Upwork, I was also drowning in student loan debt. So I remember having a pretty small tolerance for the types of clients that I worked on Upwork. So I did a few projects here and there, but again, it probably totaled $200 or something. And so I'm like, this is not going to make a dent in my student loan payments here. So I had my eye on consistent clients. And so I had a few projects under my belt. I knew the importance of doing amazing work. I think that's such a good mentality to have as a freelancer, is just doing your absolute best for clients, for getting that testimonial and also getting potential referral. So I think one of the projects was less than $50, and it was doing some research for like a press list or something like that. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do an amazing job, get another 5-star project under my belt on Upwork. But I need to start making some more money here. So I remember very vividly I think I applied. I think I ended up applying to this role for a marketing agency, and they needed just a social media contractor to work with them. And so they had a long list of questions, and I was like, I don't know. Seems like it's more in the employee, one of those like fake employee jobs. And I was like, hey, why not? Why not? I'll just answer some of these questions, show them my portfolio, and again, like let's see what happens. And I've kind of kept that mindset because you never know. You really, really never know. It's all about showing up, putting that best foot forward. And lo and behold, they ended up reaching out and they're like, hey, we want to work with you. And so because of them, I will be forever grateful to them because that was a consistent project. So every single month, they would pay me a certain amount of money to work a certain amount of hours. And I didn't have to go finding other clients. I could just do an incredible job with them. And that's how my earnings got up. And I will never, ever forget the day I got top rated status because I had my earnings hit that threshold. I got that top rated badge. And then that's when everything changed. That's literally where clients would just come to me and they would just send me messages and I could pick and choose which projects that I got to work on, which was just like mind blowing for me because that's what you want as a freelancer. You want to be choosy. You want to work with only the best clients that respect you, they value you, they're low maintenance, they pay well. And so then I could kind of pick and choose like which projects I wanted to work on, which was amazing. And then that's when I really didn't have to worry about client acquisition. I was able to pick and choose the clients and the projects that I wanted to work on, and then I could just work on executing the work, which was fantastic. So it was almost like my Upwork profile was my salesperson. It was my like lead generation. And so clients would find me and I could pretty much just bring in clients just from my profile, which was fantastic.
Yeah, I remember when you got that first client or that first retainer client, and that was such a big deal for you because, now they're paying you month in, month out. It was kind of similar-ish to an employee job, but obviously you were working from home, and it was a part-time, contract thing where you gave them a set amount of hours of your time every single week. But that retainer job that you got was such a big deal for your profile because it was constant. It was a constant sort of boosting of your earnings on there. And I think this is a good time to highlight the difference between I'm a very project-based profile and you have a very retainer-based service. And I'm closing in now, 6, 7 years later, on my 100th project. I think if I get one more project, that'll be my 100th project. And again, close to, I should hit 200K with that project. You have less than 10 total projects on your profile. And I want our audience to know that you can make serious money with not a lot of clients on Upwork if you have a service that you can provide a retainer model. And I think what that highlights is that all it takes is one good client. All it takes is one good client for you and your Upwork profile to go from 0 to 100, because all it takes is one retainer to take your profile from 1,000 to 5,000 to $10,000 earned. And now you're top rated. Now you've got a nice badge on your profile and your earnings look solid. And that is going to just make it that much easier for you to earn that second client who's going to put you on retainer and then boost you to, 50K. So I just want people to realize that, yeah, Jessica might only have, 10 completed projects on Upwork at this point, but she's closing in on 100K. And that's all thanks to the retainer model and retaining good clients.
Listen, I would not have it any other way. I very intentionally decided to create my freelancing business around this idea of monthly retainers. A really big reason behind this decision was because I was drowning in student loan debt. So things got very real very fast when you owe a large amount of money on a monthly basis. And so I decided I'm going to be very intentional with my business and just work with a few handful of monthly retainer clients. And I figured out that if I can offer these monthly retainer clients, I can have more impact, therefore having a longer retention with that client. So, yes, your services immensely valuable. Obviously, you don't need that praise from me, but clients are hiring you with a different thought process. They want incredible video. When clients hire me, they want revenue, they want impact, they want to see those results. And so it's a nice offer. It's a nice package when I say, hey, let me be your marketing consultant and I can provide this retainer service and I can directly attribute my work with you to the bottom line, the revenue. So just want to call that out for any freelancers who maybe you're not getting the traction that you want with clients and projects. Thinking about it like that and thinking, how can you provide more value? So it's better for you and your bottom line as a freelancer. You can make more money and it's better just longevity working with a client on a longer term monthly retainer basis.
Yeah, 100%. If you can find a way to offer your service to a client on a regular basis, maybe you provide them a discount if they hire you on a monthly basis, but find a way to retain that client for longer. That's always a great way to build your Upwork profile, and that's how you build your profile on a very few select high value clients. So at this point in the story, I want to make it clear that we are still winning work on Upwork via proposals. So we haven't been getting a bunch of invite only jobs yet at this point. We're still trying to get to that 50K earned mark, but Upwork, what it's done for our freelancing lives is it's given us a central place to spend our time in a higher value way, in a higher leverage way to win work. And that is just such a relief as a freelancer to have a place where you can scan the job feed, find jobs that, they are few and far between, but they are there. And over time, there's been more and more of them. Find jobs that are good for you and your skills. Find jobs that you are competitive for when looking at your portfolio and your previous jobs, and then submitting a really well tight knit crafted proposal. And over time, as we wrote proposals and as we submitted more and more proposals, we got better at it. And our close rate got higher and our response rate got higher until eventually, I think my response rate to my proposals was 1 in 5. So 20%, maybe it got up to 30%, just because I was being super intentional. We all try the apply to every single job technique. It doesn't work. It costs us a lot of money. But if you take a very intentional, selective approach and then really spend a lot of time on these proposals and not in a way where you're writing out paragraph long proposals, but you are researching the company where you can. You are really thinking critically about how you are the best freelancer for the job and how to present yourself like you are going to be the most enjoyable human being to work with as well. So you're humanizing yourself, but you're also highlighting why your skills are the best for that job. And we got really good at competing inside that job feed and winning work.
Yeah, I think that was around the time that we decided experimenting with profile videos, which not a lot of other freelancers were doing at the time. And I think I remember recording my profile video, and that soon became a differentiator for me on Upwork because not many freelancers are comfortable posting a profile video. And because mine was high quality, thanks to someone, I was able to use that as a competitive advantage so that when I'm sending these proposals, someone, reads it over. Okay, cool. Who is Jessica? They click on my profile, they watch my video, and they already built trust with me. They can see me talking, they can see how I communicate, and they're like, oh, I want to go with Jessica over Susie or Annie or all these other freelancers because she's able to communicate with me, which I think is huge just in terms of being really efficient with sending proposals and obviously landing those clients.
Yeah, I remember we leaned heavily into our unfair advantage, which was high-end video production and finding ways to include videos in our profile, finding ways to include links to videos in our proposals. And that was something that really helped us outcompete our competition. And it's still, even as of today, a huge, huge way to stand out. by doing things that are hard, doing things that are not easy, doing things that make you uncomfortable, which is talking on video, presenting yourself on video, coming across like a professional, and really just putting yourself out there. So yeah, at this point, what Upwork had done in terms of changing our lives is it's really streamlined the client acquisition problem, which is again the hardest and the most valuable problem that freelancers have to solve, which is where are my clients coming from? How am I getting my face out there? How am I presenting my offer? And Upwork's user interface and just the overall system of Upwork, it really did streamline client acquisition for us. Where if we did have a slow month, we can just spend more time on Upwork, spend more focus on Upwork, and we could actually have a lever that we could pull to bring in more clients versus without Upwork, it really is a matter of, okay, time to send more cold emails, time to, send 1,000 cold emails this month versus 500. So it's just in terms of leverage with your time, Upwork is a much higher leverage activity versus trying to send cold messages across I don't care what platform it is, cold messages are going to be a very, very low return on your time.
And not to mention other freelancing activities like going to networking events, hopefully asking for referrals, maybe sending those LinkedIn messages, which I know falls in the bucket of cold outreach. But there's a lot of other things that you're doing as a freelancer. And if we think about it, you only have 24 hours in a day, and you think about all the things that you have to do as a freelancer, and it can be really overwhelming. So, just from an efficiency standpoint, if Upwork can take 3 hours a day of your most valuable time and use that to bring in new leads to you, you're set. So now you have 3 hours or whatever freed up because finding clients is so insanely time consuming. It's so time consuming and it's emotionally time consuming because I don't know, when you send out a bunch of cold pitches or cold emails and you get a 0 response rate, oh my gosh, your energy tanks. You're discouraged. You're mentally exhausted from that activity. And so if Upwork can come into the equation, you know, be your salesperson in a sense so that clients find your profile, they're already pre-vetted on you, which I think is such a huge piece of this puzzle is like you don't have to convince, these are warm leads coming to your door. So it's just a matter of, does price make sense? Do the deliverables make sense? Do I like Jessica? Do I like Tyler? And then boom, we're off to the races. So these are warm leads coming to your door, which is absolutely fantastic. So just from a time management scalability aspect, Upwork has been huge so that you can actually make things work as a freelancer and make good money.
So that's basically the progression, right? We created our profiles. We figured out how to win jobs in the job feed. We slowly figured out how to raise our rates. We got away from the hourly job model and into the fixed price model. We figured out what the red flags were for bad Upwork clients. And then eventually we got our badges and eventually we got to a point where we're at now, 6, 7 years later, where we actually don't need to spend a lot of time in that job feed. We don't need to spend much time looking, filtering, trying to find the right jobs in the public job feed because our profiles have become so strong and have entrenched themselves in our own niches so strongly that clients actually come to us and we get a lot of direct messages. We get a lot of invite-only invites, basically clients that are warm coming directly to us. And it's just, every day I have to pinch myself because I know this sounds like a sponsored testimonial, but it really is where we're at now is somewhere that I never thought I'd get to as a freelancer, which is I'm no longer worried about where my work is coming from because it simply comes to me and I just pick the best opportunities. And I know for a fact that if you follow what we did and you take our advice that we've given you guys on this channel and you really take an intentional approach to Upwork and you don't let yourself get overly emotional and you stay patient and you choose the right opportunities, you can get to the point where you are not worried about finding clients because so many of them come to you that it's no longer an issue you have to worry about actively. And your profile will get to a point where you simply attract clients to you and then choose from the best. And that's really what we want for you guys. We want you guys to learn how to leverage Upwork, learn how to position yourself to where client acquisition, which is the bane of all of our existence, is no longer something you have to worry about. And that's what we're here to do. We're here to help you guys get to that point because we know how hard it can be to be a freelancer. We've been there. We've been in the trenches. We've clawed our way out. I remember back in the day making videos for $200 for the worst clients on the most boring projects. And now I'm in a place where every week is different from the next. I'm working with great clients. And it's a great adventure now. And I actually have time to create this podcast with you, right? If we weren't successful freelancers, I don't think that you and I would be able to give ourselves permission to spend so much time creating this content. Like, this is just another result of us having enough spare time as freelancers that we can go out and actually work on side projects. And this is one of those side projects. And that's what we want for you guys as well.
So I just think back to my younger self, little Jessica, who wore these big glasses and short hair because she wanted to look older and present herself in a certain type of way. I just think back to her, and she was struggling so hard with student loan debt and just not knowing how to pay that off. And I know I keep going on and on about that, but that was kind of the reason that I dipped my toe into freelancing, because I literally had to make more money on a monthly basis, and my 9 to 5 income was just not gonna cut it. And so that's kind of what opened this whole can of worms. But I just think back to my younger self, and she could not even fathom where I'm at right now and the types of clients that I've been able to work with because of Upwork. Now, again, like Tyler and I have mentioned, we've put in the work. We have put in the work. We've played the long game. I mean, I've turned down a lot of projects and a lot of clients on Upwork just because I didn't want to risk my Upwork profile, because I knew if I'm going to be in this for the long game, I'm going to be in this. So I turned down projects that I thought, oh my gosh, there's just an ounce that something could go sideways and they wouldn't write me a 5-star review. So I've been insanely intentional and just playing the long-term game. And something else I want to call out, I think a huge, huge part of this is Tyler and I have positioned ourselves as the premium option in our respectful services, which seems really, really counterintuitive because, again, if you're new to Upwork and you just glance through the job feed, you want to cry, you're super discouraged, and it seems very counterintuitive. Like, it looks like a race to the bottom, but Tyler and I, again, figured out that if you position yourself as the premium option, that's when you start attracting those high value clients. That's how you start separating yourself from the pack of other freelancers. So that's a huge part of the success that we've had, is we've played the long game. We've been really, really intentional with the types of projects and positioning ourselves as a high value premium option in the Upwork marketplace. So now I'm at a point where fewer clients do reach out to me, but my close rate is like 9 out of 10. So again, my Upwork profile is doing the selling for me. So the client has already done their due diligence, and then they're coming to me because I am a premium option. And then it's just a matter of, does this make sense? But again, my close rate, in terms of looking at an efficiency perspective with running my business and figuring out, how many clients do I want to take on, I can decide what projects and what clients to work with.
And again, we're not saying that Upwork is responsible for 100% of what we make on a yearly basis, but for me, Upwork has increased my yearly income by about 30%. And that is a huge deal, especially for someone who is self-employed. That is a life-changing percentage for me. And I think it will be for most people if they had their income increase by 30%. So it's definitely been a game changer. We hear that word thrown around a lot, but Upwork really did change our lives, and it changed it for the better. And it made our lives less stressful. It made it so that we didn't have to worry as much about where our next job was coming from. And it just gave us a system to have clients come to us. And that I can't tell you how valuable that is as a freelancer. And there's really only a few ways to do that in the world to have warm leads come to you. You can become a social media star. You can create content on YouTube and have people actually find it. Or you can create a profile on Upwork, figure out how to actually position yourself in the right way, and you can let Upwork's algorithm bring clients to you that way. Obviously you have to compete in that job market for the first phase, but once you learn how to do that, and once your profile builds and builds, and your earnings build and reviews build, you can get to a point where your profile is literally a lead magnet. And we're not paid to say that. It's just the reality for us.
So you can think of Upwork like a lever that you can pull whenever you need clients. I don't think it's smart to have one lead generation platform, as a freelancer, as a business owner, with things changing so fast. That's not a smart business decision. You should always have multiple avenues, multiple ways to get clients, and Upwork can just be one of those levers that you can pull when you're in a pinch or sales are down and you need some freelance income. Upwork is a great place to do that in addition to these other lead sources.
So hopefully our stories have kind of painted the picture for you about how much of a difference Upwork has made in our lives. Jessica and I are in two completely different industries. She's in marketing consulting and I'm in video production. And yet we've both figured out how to win at Upwork. We've both figured out how to use it and leverage it to make our lives less stressful as freelancers and to go from how to survive, right, to actually thriving as freelancers. And I think that's what we all want. We all want to get away from clawing and trying to figure out how to survive and get into how can I actually thrive and pick the best projects and actually enjoy my lifestyle versus just trying to make it as a freelancer. And so, we're always going to be grateful for Upwork for that. We've talked about some of the problems that Upwork has, and, it's not a perfect platform, but it is the most powerful freelancing platform that we've come across. And we really think that a lot of people are probably not using it to its max advantage. So if you are looking to take your Upwork game to the next level, we are super excited to announce that we are very close to launching our own school community. It's going to be called Freelance Pros on School. And that's where we're going to have our course that we spent a long time crafting and making sure it covered everything you need to know. And then it's also going to include more mentoring opportunities where we can actually help you directly and help you identify exactly maybe what's going wrong with your profile or your proposals or a million different other things that could be the problem, why you're not getting as much traction as you want on Upwork. So if you're interested in that, this is the last week as of this launch of this video to send me an email to get added to our pre-launch list, which is going to have a huge discount compared to our launch pricing. So send me an email if you want to be a part of our group. We are not going to be admitting everyone that applies. So we are taking a very selective approach with this community as well. So we will have a questionnaire for you to fill out. And, this group is not going to be for everyone, but I think for the people that do get into our group, they're going to appreciate the fact that we were very selective with who we let in. So again, if you're interested in that, send me an email. Otherwise, thanks for watching and we'll see you in the next one. Happy freelancing.